Tonight, our new norm, tough restrictions as the shutdown enters stage 2. We look at what that means for Queenslanders. A coronavirus cluster on the Sunshine Coast. At least 17 people test positive after one restaurant function. Most elective surgeries, public and private, cancelled as the health system prepares for an onslaught. And our 3 NRL clubs shed staff after the season is halted. Good evening, Matt Wordsworth with ABC News. They're the latest extraordinary changes to the way we live. Many services are closing tonight in an effort to limit social gatherings and stop a pandemic in its tracks. From midnight, the new restrictions begin. The Prime Minister wants people to stay inside and work from home if possible, and cancel large barbecues, birthday celebrations and dinner parties. Weddings will be limited to 5 people, funerals to 10. Beauty and massage parlours will be closed and haircuts limited to 30 minutes. Real estate auctions and open house inspections will no longer happen, and other venues will shut their doors. Australians will also be banned from travelling overseas after previously being advised not to. This is all hitting the economy hard, and we're seeing huge job losses. Virgin Australia saying today it'll stand down 8,000 of its 10,000 workers and suspend 90% of its domestic flights. Fears of the virus have sent many people into isolation, and those who are still working are increasingly worrying about loved ones who are at risk. But this is our new normal. Lexi Hamilton-Smith begins our coverage.
Parts of the city are a virtual ghost town. Empty streets, empty escalators, empty shops. Whole centres are without customers. Others are waiting for the axe to fall.
There's a lot less foot traffic, so we're all in a slightly precarious spot here.
This is the new dawn, the frightening coronavirus reality, with Centrelink officers ground zero.
Obviously people are suffering.
Yes, just a bit scary.
Hairdressers are looking for creative ways to offer services, with clients restricted to 30-minute sessions.
Right now we're considering if they can only be in the building for 30 minutes at a time. If we would put a colour on, they can maybe sit in their own vehicle and then cleanse their hands as they come back in.
This lone barber is staying afloat, one customer at a time.
Well, business is already down 50% anyway, because there's no one in the streets, but yeah, it seems like a dream to me.
But others are at crisis point.
Yeah, it's not good.
Thousands are now working from home. Robert Chan is a wealth manager trying to ride the stock market for clients remotely.
Being a stockbroker with the way that the world is at the moment, a lot of concerned clients out there.
With a 3-year-old son to care for and sick elderly parents, he's scared about what is to come.
It is a big worry, and I suspect everybody else in Australia's got the same problem.
As you walk around, you can feel anxiety levels rising. You can see it in people's faces. So many tough days ahead and so many tough decisions to be made. This business behind me has just shut down its entire operation. 13 venues across Brisbane, and they've sacked 100 staff. It's the first time in 20 years they've had to shut their doors.
It's gut-wrenching to see this happen, but what can we do? We've got to do what's best for our people.
The socially isolated are losing contact with family.
All our children are in Queensland, and we have got our first granddaughter, the first great-grandchild, and we haven't seen it yet.
Jean Fish is 83 and her husband Max is 91. They live across the border in New South Wales, banned from entering Queensland.
We're restricted now. I can't even play bridge.
University students are also in virtual lockdown.
It is not the same as being in the classroom, seeing your friends, seeing the lecturers. It's actually really isolating.
But amongst all the darkness, some light. 21-year-old Bindi Irwin believed to have tied the knot at a ceremony at Australia Zoo this afternoon, ahead of the federal government's deadline on wedding size restrictions. Lexi Hamilton-Smith, ABC News, Brisbane.
At midnight tonight, Queensland borders will close. Police already are ramping up their presence on the border with New South Wales, and our reporter Jen Huxley is there. Jen, has there been any increase in traffic in the lead-up?
Matt, look, it's actually been incredibly quiet all day, but in the past hour or so, the traffic has really started to increase. Interestingly, too, there's been a lot of people walking around, flouting those instructions to stay at home, but they do seem to actually be drawn to the RBT-style police roadblock that's being set up behind me. That is one of 3 on the Tweed Heads-Coolangatta border that will be activated at 1 minute past midnight tonight. The other 2 being on the M1 and the Gold Coast Highway. All other roads between New South Wales and Queensland will be closed. Now, motorists are being warned to expect massive delays. Authorities have promised, though, that measures will be streamlined in the days to come.
We're working on an exemption process so that people can more seamlessly access their exemption and be given a visible sticker or an indicator for their vehicle, a vehicle pass if you like, so they are able to cross the border seamlessly and be able to go about their business. That is not going to be ready for tonight.
Matt, now police are saying that people will be allowed across the border if they can prove that they are coming to Queensland for work, they're coming for a medical appointment or to deliver freight. All other people will be turned back. Now, residents on both sides of the border are complaining that there's a lack of clarity. They don't know what this means for their individual circumstances. They're also incredibly frustrated that those vehicle permits, those visible signs to be allowed through the border more quickly haven't been made available in time for this closure tonight.
Jen, thank you. Jen Huxley. Health officials are urgently trying to track down anyone who attended a busy restaurant at the tourist hotspot of Noosa last week. At least 17 people, including 4 staff, tested positive after a birthday party at Sales on Hastings Street. Josh Bavis reports.
This restaurant is one of the busiest along Noosa's renowned Hastings Street. Now it's the centre of one of the biggest coronavirus clusters in the state.
I think this is a really clear example, everyone, about why we can no longer have parties. I mean, the time for parties has to stop now.
The local outbreak has been traced back to a function held here at Sal's restaurant on March 14, just prior to when the major restrictions were enforced. More than a dozen people here contracted COVID-19, including 4 staff members who then worked at the restaurant last Wednesday and Thursday.
Like all members of the public, we are asking everybody to be vigilant for their own symptoms and seek medical advice if they escalate.
This is how coronavirus can spread.
The restaurant owner says he's been working cooperatively with health authorities.
The party, they're all known to each other obviously, stayed in hotels and accommodation houses and obviously went to other restaurants and venues and coffee shops in and around this precinct.
This kind of public health alert can help us make sure that we get in contact with absolutely everybody.
In the past day, another 46 cases have been identified, bringing the state's total to 443. With numbers continuing to rise, so too are donations to help fight back. Queensland philanthropist Clive Berghofer has donated $1 million to help boost local research into effective treatments and also to study immunity response to the virus.
So that is so that we can test if people have developed immunity to the virus post-infection. We're looking at repurposing various drugs that are actually available and currently approved for use in humans.
The cluster identified at Noosa is similar to others recently discovered on the Gold Coast. The Premier says she won't rule out locking down particular suburbs or council regions if the spread becomes harder to contain. Josh Bavis, ABC News, Brisbane.
Almost all elective surgeries will be cancelled from tonight as both public and private hospitals prepare for an influx of coronavirus cases. Australians are being told to expect even more challenges as governments consider further shutdowns. Political reporter Jane Norman explains.
Healthy social distancing saves lives.
In times of crisis, clear communication is key.
If directed to self-isolate, you must stay home.
But this crisis is moving so quickly, it's almost impossible to keep up.
That is the law.
Late-night press conferences roll into mid-morning updates.
Morning, everyone.
Changing the way almost everything operates.
All elective surgery other than Category 1 and urgent, I stress very urgent Category 2 cases will be suspended.
Fewer than 200 coronavirus patients have needed to go to hospital, 10% requiring intensive care. But beds are being cleared and protective equipment preserved in expectation those numbers will soar.
The most urgent message that we're getting for people to stay home is to stay home if you're sick.
Everyone else is being asked to limit their movements and stay home unless they need to go out.
These decisions are not being made by premiers and chief ministers and myself lightly. We are very mindful of the impact.
Draconian measures designed to save lives are devastating livelihoods. In just a few hours, 280,000 jobless Australians registered for government support. Those still in work, all now deemed essential.
An essential worker is a worker with a job.
Some staff could be redeployed. A new coordination commission's being set up to fix problems and fill gaps.
Whether it's retasking workforces, whether it's ensuring we get food to supermarkets.
It'll be headed up by Neville Power, a former chief executive of the Fortescue Metals Group.
We've got the best people in this country working to solve the problems and the challenges that are going to confront us.
One of the biggest challenges confronting governments and medical experts is how hard and fast to move in this crisis. On that front, tensions have emerged within National Cabinet, with Victoria pushing for even tougher restrictions. Australia's already been partially shut down, a full lockdown looms. But governments are being urged by chief medical officers to hold off until it's clear what impact these initial measures are having.
Victoria wants to go faster and further, same measures, it's just putting them in faster.
For the second night in a row, the National Cabinet's meeting, this time to consider relief for renters. More announcements and more changes to come. Jane Norman, ABC News, Canberra.
Pressure is really building on the housing market after the federal government ruled out public auctions and open house inspections. Elise Morgan has this report.
Are you registering today?
The weekend pastime of watching homes go under the hammer is gone for now, and busy inspections have been replaced with private viewings.
This is a really watershed time for real estate agents. We've never been in this situation before.
People thinking of selling perhaps suspected this would happen.
At $1,150,000.
Last weekend was the second busiest for auctions this year, and this weekend was to be the busiest, with thousands of homes scheduled to go under the hammer.
Sold.
Many have been cancelled, while some agents are finding alternatives.
Virtual auctions and only open houses, it's a whole new world for us.
On Melbourne's Eastern Fringe, Angelica Kingsley was hoping for a quick sale.
I feel it's going to take a lot longer this time now due to the virus.
She's hoping she won't have to discount her $730,000 asking price.
Not straight away, possibly, ask me again in 3 months, I might have a different answer.
Some leading economists believe national home prices could drop by 20%, but it's only if the shutdown is long and if unemployment more than doubles from here, which is not out of the question. Landlords like Tracy Clancy have already been hit. She's cut the rent by $100 a week for her out-of-work tenants.
I can afford it at the moment, that's for sure. But circumstances may change, who knows?
The majority of Australia's rental accommodation is owned by mum and dad investors.
If it does go for longer than, say, 6 months, then I think that's where we start seeing the risks becoming much more extreme.
The major banks have all said they'll give borrowers some leniency over the next 6 months, but it's not clear what happens after that. Elise Morgan, ABC News.
A blame game has erupted over who was responsible for allowing passengers to disembark from the Ruby Princess cruise ship in Sydney when there was illness on board. 2,700 passengers left the ship last week. Yesterday, a 77-year-old woman died and more than 130 people have now tested positive for coronavirus. 13 tests were done on the ship, but passengers were allowed to leave before the results were known. The state government insists it exceeded national protocols, but Border Force has blamed New South Wales for the bungle.
The decision to allow them off in relation to the health and biosecurity issue was one for New South Wales Health.
The New South Wales government has now put in stricter rules so that nobody is allowed off a ship until testing is done and the results come back. There's been a major push to get boarding school students back home to their families in the Torres Strait so the region can go into lockdown. Island communities in the far north fear they'll be wiped out if coronavirus takes hold.
After weeks of waiting, these teenagers are finally going home. The Bardu Island residents have been stuck in their boarding house in Cairns, which is closing due to COVID-19 concerns.
As it's gone on, the boys have got a little bit more frustrated and they're just keen to get home.
Kind of miss my mum and dad.
But the risk these students pose to their Torres Strait Islander elders isn't taken lightly. They've been learning social distancing and hand washing techniques.
We don't want to harm our elderly people because they're the one with the knowledge.
The teenagers will now isolate for a fortnight in 2 houses set up specifically for coronavirus quarantining.
Pretty stressful, but hopefully I can cope with it.
With limited supplies, the Bardu community is doing everything it can to stop coronavirus from reaching its shores. The health clinic has only 1 bed for patients. Any exposure to COVID-19 would likely have catastrophic consequences.
If it does get you, it'll wipe everybody out. Most of the people on the island have chronic illnesses. They've got kidney disease, heart disease.
There's been no confirmed cases of COVID-19 in the Torres Strait so far, and local authorities this week banned all non-essential travel in and out of the region. The island will go into lockdown once everyone has returned home. Marion Farr, ABC News.
Local government elections are still going ahead at this stage, despite national health authorities warning of the potential to further spread coronavirus. The Premier says the majority of people have already voted at pre-polling booths or by post. Physical distancing measures will be in place for voters, and people are being encouraged to bring their own pencil or pen. But the country's Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Paul Kelly, says people should not vote if they're unwell.
If this was going to go ahead, that would be a potential for a major mixing event. So, first thing, anyone who's sick should not be going to vote.
The health advice is very clear. As long as you practice social distancing, there is a very, very low risk.
In Logan, south of Brisbane, locals will choose a new council to replace the one that was dismissed.
After sitting empty for almost a year, these council chambers will soon be full of elected officials once again. An administrator has been in charge of Logan City since the entire council was sacked last May, after the mayor and 7 councillors were charged with fraud.
It's very important that the power is back in the hands of the people. It's way overdue.
Political experts say the choice won't necessarily be simple.
It's going to be dramatic for voters as they go to the polls and probably see a whole lot of names they are not familiar with.
Only 4 councillors from the previous administration are up for election. That's encouraged more people than usual to throw their hat in the ring. More than 60 people have joined the race to represent Logan City, including 6 who want to be mayor. That's up 50% on numbers last time out, and political analysts say the reason behind the spike is clear.
There is no incumbent, and therefore people think it's worth their while to stand, put in the effort as a candidate. Their chances are vastly improved.
And more people means more diversity, including one of the youngest candidates in Queensland.
A big reason why young people are apathetic towards local government is because we've had really bad politicians in our city. Young people need to be involved in our community.
And others from a range of cultural backgrounds.
Australia is a great, diverse country, and it gives people like me the opportunity to have a go. And of course, we need diversity in Logan.
But for some, it's not about who's running, it's about what they can deliver.
We just want the best person for the job. Doesn't matter whether it's a senior citizen, a young person, an ethnic, of whatever background. The person who's committed to representing the community.
Talissa Saganto, ABC News, Logan.
There are concerns the move to online learning for school students will widen the digital divide between wealthy Australians and those without easy digital access. With coronavirus prompting early school holidays and some remote learning, states and territories are trying to level the playing field. But not-for-profits say the situation is going to create pressure for parents and could leave more disadvantaged students behind.
Peter and Ty Metzentine's 3 children have plenty to do outdoors. But both parents are recently unemployed and they're worried about the potential for prolonged school shutdowns due to coronavirus.
So we have a laptop that has everything on it, which was a work one, and we have an iPad, which at the moment it's an old iPad, but you've got to pay updates to download certain programs, and we just don't have the capacity to, allow each kid to do what they need to at the moment.
Across the country, some schools are on early holidays. Some parents are keeping kids home and other schools have moved to online learning. There are concerns that's widening the gap between wealthy families and those without access to devices and internet.
There are many, many families out there in Australia for whom those things aren't a given. And so what we expect is that those families will be forced into uncharted territory almost.
2.5 million Australians are not online and an even greater number have low digital literacy. Schools and education departments are trying to find solutions, but not-for-profits are helping bridge the digital gap. Info Exchange connects those in need with services and internet. Demand has doubled in the past week.
We're finding that disadvantage is even further exacerbated as schools are looking to move to online learning. As government is providing information online, a lot of services online.
MacKillop Education Services provides education for young people who can't access mainstream schooling, are disengaged or live in out-of-home care.
So this situation is obviously going to compound those challenges for those families.
Staff at MacKillop are developing resources and lessons in case students can't return to school after the Victorian school holidays.
So all of those are in hard copy and not reliant on students having to access devices or technology.
A difficult path to navigate. Ellen Coulter, ABC News.
Donald Trump wants the US to reopen for business by Easter, despite warnings from the World Health Organization that the country could become the next epicentre of the coronavirus pandemic.
Lining up in the rain for a COVID-19 test. The scene in New York is grim and getting worse.
We were looking at a freight train coming across the country. We're now looking at a bullet train.
Despite the empty streets, the spread of coronavirus is accelerating. 25,000 are known to be infected in New York alone, and that number is doubling every 3 days.
We are the epicenter. I don't want us to be the epicenter, but we are the epicenter of this crisis.
New York has taken on a bit of an Armageddon feel.
As the city shut down around him, Australian Ryan Hamilton battled coronavirus for 12 days, with only the TV for company.
You're sitting here on a Netflix binge trying to escape the symptoms, and you hear this kind of cops, sirens and loudspeakers in the background. My first thought was it was on the screen.
Federal authorities have sent 400 additional ventilators, but it's not enough.
FEMA says we're sending 400 ventilators when I need 30,000. You pick the 26,000 people who are going to die because you only sent 400 ventilators.
Corporations are stepping into the breach. Ford has repurposed 3D printers to make medical supplies. The National Guard is helping with crucial hospital deliveries. With the economy reeling, President Donald Trump wants his nation back to work, so he's pushing his advisors to find a way for restrictions to be lifted by Easter Sunday, just 19 days away.
Our people are full of vim and vigor and energy. They don't want to be locked into a house or an apartment or some space. It's not for our country. We're not built that way.
Health experts are concerned, but the president insists every decision will be made with the safety of Americans in mind. David Lipson, ABC News, Washington.
To finance now, here's Alan Kohler.
Well, the Dow Jones jumped 11.4% last night, and there have only been 4 better days in history. And they were all between October 1929 and March 1933, during the Great Depression, which drives home the point that a double-digit rise in the share market in one day is not necessarily good. In fact, history would suggest it may be really bad. Two reasons for last night's rebound. The Federal Reserve announced money printing to infinity and beyond on Monday, and last night it looked like the warring parties in US Congress would agree on a $2 trillion fiscal stimulus package. Here's a graph of US national debt, so make that +2. Anyway, it was global happiness today. The S&P 500 up at 9.4%, the German market more than 10, UK 9, and strong gains around Asia today as well. The local market jumped 5.3% to back above 5,000 for the first time in a week. Afterpay jumped 34% on top of 26% yesterday. It had been down 28% the day before, up 22% the day before that, down 22% the day before that. So there's no better sign than investors have no idea what to do. BHP jumped 10% today, Transurban 11%, ANZ nearly 12%. But retail group Mosaic fell 23% after announcing that it's closing all its stores and standing down its entire staff of 6,800 people. And Virgin Australia stood down 8,000 people today after reducing domestic capacity by 90% and entirely suspending Tiger Air. So watch the unemployment rates climb from here. The news at Qantas was a little more positive. It's managed to borrow $1 billion by mortgaging 7 of its planes. On commodity markets, there were big moves among precious metals. Iron ore went up a lot, oil fell, and the Australian dollar is up again to just under 60 US cents. And that's finance.
Still to come this hour, the Australians trapped at sea.
They cancelled the first stop in the Maldives, so we started to worry a lot about what was going to happen.
We're all appear smiling and happy, but underneath, many of us are really worried.
Also, Dr. Norman Swan looks at the medical theory that short-term pain will deliver maximum gain in defeating coronavirus. That's coming up.
Up to 85% of staff have been laid off from within Queensland's NRL clubs. The North Queensland Cowboys dismissed more than 50 staff today as the implications of suspending the 2020 NRL season become clearer.
We're prepared to dig in. The reason these decisions have been made are to ensure that we're here for the long haul. At the moment, the NRL are working on scenarios for a competition resurrection this year. We don't have any guarantees of what that looks like.
Despite being the code's richest club, Brisbane Broncos CEO Paul White says pay cuts and job losses are taking place across the board.
I don't want to speak with specifics. Our senior coach, our head coach, senior staff have all taken the same level of pain in terms of pay cuts as we have, and they put their hand up for that.
Club CEOs were briefed by the NRL on Tuesday. Weather now with Ashley Stevenson.
Matt, I'll start with some good news. There has been rain for parts of the southern interior. Not huge totals, but in the 24 hours to 9 a.m, South Commongin near Quilpie had 28 millimetres and Kaladi had 39. Temperature-wise, we're still a little below average in the south. A cool start of 16 degrees at Toowoomba, just 26 in Thargomindah, which is 8 below average for this time of year, 31 the top for Townsville. In Brisbane, the sun decided to peek out from behind the clouds today, a top of 27 in the city and 28 for Gatton. Zooming out, you can see that cloud has shifted over into New South Wales and Queensland, bringing showers and the odd thunderstorm. That trough is going to stall, so we could see further very light showers in parts of the interior. More rain for the peninsula too, thanks to that trough over the top end. To the major centres, rain for Sydney and 23. Mostly fine in Melbourne and 21. A chilly start in Hobart, dropping to 6 degrees, then topping 18. A shower or two for Perth and very hot on 37. Home to Queensland, showers are possible in a line stretching from the central west through to the southeast. Don't expect big totals though. There's a high chance of showers and some thunderstorms for the coast north of about Ingham. Taking a closer look at the north, showers for Cooktown and Cairns, which is heading for 30. Mostly fine for central parts, 32 in Moranbah and 31 in Rocky. Sunny in the west, Birdsville heading for 34, 33 in Windora. Showers for Goondiwindi and 27. Showers and storms are possible for the Darling Downs and Granite Belt, staying cool under the cloud cover, 22 the top in Applethorpe. Showers developing from the late morning in Brisbane with a top of 28. On Moreton Bay, winds southeasterly reaching 25 knots in the evening, seas increasing to 1.5 metres, sunrise at 6 minutes to 6. And looking ahead, showers becoming more likely as we head into the weekend. The best chance of rain is Saturday, when Brisbane is looking at a top of 25. Matt?
Thanks, Ash. That's ABC News to the moment. Keep up to date on our website, but now it's time for 7:30. Do have a great night.